I'm joined again by Jose Antonio Hopkins, Director of Simplifying Climate. How are you doing, Jose?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you, Andrew. How are you this morning?
Yeah, I'm well, thanks. Well, thanks again for taking the time to have a chat, Jose. Can you just again give us a short recap of your background, going from being an auditor through to launching Simplify Climate?
Yes, of course. And thank you for the question. I think my background is quite interesting with my current landscape of various hats and roles. So at the moment, I'm acting as a sustainability lecturer for the University of West London. So I do a lecture every Monday. Then I'm also leading Simplify Climate from a consulting perspective. So we effectively help organizations simplify sustainability matters and integrate those accordingly. And then I'm also a health and wellbeing advocate by sharing all my experience on my transformation journey in the last 3 years. But yeah, where did it all started? In a nutshell, started at KPMG Chile. So I studied accounting and finance at the University of Northumbria in Newcastle. The financial crisis hit, unfortunately, and I was applying for all these roles that I didn't really want to be a clerk or an accounts payable kind of lead. So I decided to go back to Chile. I worked with KPMG Chile for 3 or 4 years, auditing mining companies. That gave me a lot of insight into sustainability and specifically on environmental matters such as mining provisions, environmental provisions, etc. I then got an opportunity to move to KPMG London, and therefore I made the decision to move to London. I was there for a good 7 years, managing global audits as a senior manager, involving mainly agricultural audits. One of the big four basically is called Syngenta. So that was my baby for a good 7 years, let me put it that way. That gave me a lot of insights to more sustainability matters such as biodiversity and also the changes in weather. Weather is an aspect that agriculture quite advanced in terms of monitoring as well. I also got experience auditing a number of FTSE companies across the landscape, such as Cass Minerals and other listed companies. But I think, how did I get to sustainability? I heard the word TCFD back in 2017 when I was at KPMG. Then the regulations started kicking off in 2020, and I said I want to get involved in this, specifically because of the weather aspects of that framework. And yeah, I basically started a team with our senior partners at KPMG back in 2020 with integrating TCFD. And this team see it as a kind of specialist team, more or less. You have tax specialists, you have forensic specialists. We were the climate risk specialists. As part of that process, I reviewed more than, I don't know how many entities, 100, 200 every year. But then, as you can imagine, trying to manage a global audit and also trying to integrate and challenge climate change, that led to significant levels of burnout. So I left KPMG London and I then moved to MHA, which is a smaller accountancy firm, member firm of Baker Tilly. I then acted as head of ESG for a year and a half. But again, I basically realized that accountancy firms, in terms of integrating ESG and climate change, can be quite a complex discussion, because they're very short-term in nature and the aspects of sustainability can be quite long-term. So we kind of disagreed in how to integrate ESG, and therefore I decided to leave and set up Simplify Climate, because I felt that in my role as head of ESG at MHA and as senior manager at KPMG, we needed simplification. We just got bombarded with a number of acronyms, a number of regulations. Every single week I see something different. And we just need to just calm down and just simplify the landscape to make sure that people can take action.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a complex area. So just tell us, Jose, TCFD, what does that stand for?
Assume knowledge and sometimes no, but so if I step back a bit further, I think, so the UK is the only government in the world that has integrated or implemented a climate change act. So the UK Climate Change Act of 2008 requires the UK government to produce a 5-year carbon budget. And that's the kind of first layer that happened. Then, so the thing with climate change, what I'm trying to say, is not new. TCFD didn't just create this. This is something that the UK government has been monitoring and has been integrating into their own decision making. So that's why they created the UK Climate Change Act. That then created the Climate Change Committee, the CCC that you see it. They basically issue a report to the government saying, this is what you need to do to start integrating climate change and becoming a net zero economy. And he alerts the government effectively saying, we are seeing a significant change in weather patterns affecting the UK economy, and therefore this is an investment risk that you need to consider. So then Michael Bloomberg and Mark Carney in 2017, because of this investment risk, created TCFD, the Task Force for Climate Financial Related Disclosures. And therefore, people get confused because of the D at the end, and they think it's just a disclosure checklist. but effectively it's a strategic framework to really integrate two aspects of climate change. I call it the coin. You have two sides to the coin. So one side is the transition risk, which effectively means what are the changes needed in the economy to bring it to a lower decarbonized economy, therefore a net zero economy. And then the second aspect is physical risk, which relate to the changes in weather patterns we're seeing. So probably with that 5-minute explanation, you may be thinking, what is all of this? And that's the reason why Simplified Climate exists, because the fundamentals and the concepts use of TCFD are very complex.
So ESG is obviously a huge area. Jose, what are the key areas which you're most interested in and Simplify Climate's keen to address?
Yeah, I think ESG and sustainability are huge areas. I think with the move away, I had my lecture this last week, for example, where we were speaking about what's the difference between sustainability and ESG. And I think that's the first dynamics people need to integrate is sustainability is all to do with future resources. And that can affect you economically, socially as well, and from an environmental perspective. But then ESG I see as a strategic framework for you to identify areas where you can bring opportunities and risks that may impact your organization. So for me, I feel that my passion where Simplified Climate is on the sustainability aspect, because when is those future generations going to happen? Every year we keep kicking the can down the road saying the future generation. When is those future generations? 2030, 2050? So therefore, our main key area of focus in Simplified Climate is simplifying the sustainability language effectively on extreme weather. So what does that mean, extreme weather? What does weather patterns mean? Which organizations are monitoring this investment risk, such as NASA, UK Met Office, and the EU Copernicus? But that's the fundamental area we feel really passionate about, because it's affecting people's commute to work, it's affecting your supply chain, and may affect your customers as well. And the second aspect that we are really passionate about is the social aspect, because in this country and in the UK, we're in a mental health crisis. We need to accept that. We are having a significant increase in chronic illnesses. We're having a significant increase in mental and neurodivergent conditions at the workplace, and we need to do something about that. And that's the second aspect we're really trying to hit the angle on, to really find new initiatives in how can you extract the productivity of your employees. And the third angle, which we work with experts on, is women's health. We feel that there is a significant productivity gap and a hole there, that women's health is not really understood at the workplace. All working patterns are based on male hormonal activity, but women's hormonal activity are completely different to men. So you have people working at a working pattern that's not reflective of their productivity levels. So those three aspects, we believe, if you really do them well, you can minimize disruptions. And then the second is you can find efficiency gains in your workforce.
Over the past couple of years since launching Simplified Climate, what changes have you seen in the related to ESG or sustainability within the UK?
Changes, I think for me, it's the mindset. The mindset keeps getting a bit negative about it. You have this push from the US with Trump being elected in terms of removing climate change regulation. You have the EU simplifying the regulation where companies are getting really confused. So I feel that in the UK, the mindset is looking at all of this and saying, why do I need to do it? And I think for me, that's the fundamental change you see. You have all these newspapers now writing about net zero agenda, which you never had the Sun writing about net zero now, and how much that is of a red tape to customers or clients here or people in the UK, sorry. So I think that's for me the landscape. It's misinformation is leading to a mindset that will affect you integrating this, and therefore it may affect you making a bad strategic decision going forward.
But do you think, Jose, can net zero go too far? So, for example, if people aren't able to heat their homes sufficiently, is that a case that net zero is going too far too quickly, or does it just need to be done as quickly as possible? Because I think that's where there may be resistance, just the cost to it, I think, to individuals.
And I agree with those individuals. I mean, it's what's more important, your own self-economic decisions, and therefore the net zero agenda may increase your cost. But for me, we need to step back and again see this as two areas, two sides of the coin. So The transition side is a bit of a mess at the moment. I agree, because the UK's government net zero target of 2050, is that really going to be achievable? And you have more than 80% of the FTSE covering net zero targets that are those going to be achievable? And they're requesting information from the supplier chain that, again, the supplier chain are saying, we don't have the data. So it's been rushed and pushed into something that has pushed people away from the aspects of climate change, because the reason why we're doing all this transition and all these changes to net zero is to make sure that we're generating less emissions and becoming more environmentally friendly, to make sure that the weather doesn't impact us that bad. Because the more we do the less net zero we do, the more the weather may be impacted by our increased consumption. Because one example I tell people is, look at the ocean. Look at the ocean temperatures. Those are skyrocketing every single year. We're getting hotter, and you're seeing storms that in my lifetime I didn't see before. I'm 35 years old probably, but in my lifestyle I haven't seen these levels of storms or impact from weather that we've seen before. So for me are we ready for this unpredictability? Are we adapting fast enough and understanding these changes? No, because we're focusing so much on the net zero agenda, which in my view needs to be retweaked a bit in a way that what is actually realistic.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think the messaging's quite hard to absorb for individuals if they're struggling financially, then to have to go make greater sacrifices. Yeah, sometimes I think the messaging...
It's one of the questions in my webinar I did with Neo Eco a couple of weeks ago was, if you want to be net zero and we want to be sustainable, how do we even get started? And that's the question that I always ask people is, for you to get started, shouldn't take that much of a time with the technology we have available. So we at Simplified Climate, we deploy AI, we deploy technology, and we can produce a diagnostic and a double materiality in a couple of days for you, and share and prepare that for you in a board report, and for you to then allow enhanced strategic decisions. It's quick, it's practical, and it tells you these are the aspects from ESG you need to consider, these are the aspects from climate change, and these are the other aspects that might hit you later on in your journey that you integrate. But you can only take one step at a time. It's like your fitness. It's like you're going to get on the scales and lose weight, but you can't lose weight if you don't know what calories mean or what the different components mean. So that's what, as part of our diagnostic, we teach the board on these items from a simplified perspective to make sure that they understand it.
So just to rewind a little bit, Jose, if an individual within an organisation or an organisation at board level decides that they're looking to take the first steps towards sustainability, how do they start?
So for me, it's get on the scales, engage an external third-party provider or yourself, start reviewing your financial statements and start assessing which areas from our financial statements we need to do more work on. So from the TCFD frameworks and from the various, you can actually produce your own kind of questionnaire. And I think for me, that's the first step you need to do is get on the scales. How? So for example, I'm company A in the UK and I want to be sustainable. So I'm in Peterborough. Let's put company A, I'm in Peterborough and I want to become sustainable. Where do I even get started? So the step one is, what are your expectations from your key stakeholders? So I think that's the first question you need to ask yourself. What's my bank asking me on this? What's my insurance asking me on this? My top customers asking me on this? My top suppliers? So that's called your stakeholder engagement. What do they expect you to do? And that will generate some results and expectations. And then you need to review your financial statements and assess your assumptions and judgments. Do I have any buildings, any assets, any suppliers, any customers located in areas where it's more risky at the moment? And not just from extreme weather, from geopolitical impacts that we're having, from pollution, from water security, water access, from waste management, from extreme weather. So it's effectively your balance sheet will tell you where you operate, and you can start categorizing which assets may be more at risk that needs monitoring. And then the third aspect will be, what's the regulation that's going to be impacting you? And you have so many sources out there in terms of AI and technology that can really review your company and say, these are the 3 things that will affect you. And then that third aspect is where you can build your roadmap. So with those 3 buckets of information, you can start creating an understanding of what people expect from me and then what's actually achievable for me.
Do you think there's sometimes a reluctance from organisations to start to take those first steps because almost opens a can of worms, and then once they know what they need to be doing, then there's then going to need to be a commitment to spend money on it? Is that, do you think, causing a reluctance for some organisations to engage with it?
Definitely. I mean, I think it's the same with sustainability. The majority of people think sustainability is a burden. Let's be honest. It's like if I want to be sustainable, it may be a burden for me because I need to do more reporting. It will increase my costs, etc. But you have organizations out there who have integrated sustainability in a practical perspective, and they've been able to reduce the cost of capital. And I think what people forget about this sustainability, in my view, is effectively for your brand enhancement, which is your biggest goodwill that you have. And that will, who will follow that brand? Your employees. And that's something that's heavily demanded now. I see this in interviews. I see this everywhere. How sustainable is your organization? What are you doing for ESG? So for you to hire the next future generation, so for you to have the best people, because usually the most productive and the best people who work at an organization at an operating level that's excelling are usually sustainable, are usually caring about their own health. They may be caring about their own well-being. So I think that's for me the aspect.
Right, you touched upon around the conversation. You've implemented AI into the way that you deliver ESG reviews. Jose, how is AI impacting ESG over the past couple of years?
I think for me, the main thing I've seen in terms of is a reduction in time I spent. Let me give you two examples. I think stakeholder surveys, that's the old school method now of sending a questionnaire to your stakeholders and being very manual and, hey, by the way, and sometimes the responses can be wrong, or sometimes the responses can be not in the right bucket, or maybe you send it to the wrong person. So imagine all the process you're doing there for that can then be automated to AI, and you're using open source intelligence data. You don't even need to contact your stakeholders using AI such as Polycat as well, that gives you, keywords being mentioned on trends affecting your organization will also give you indications of how are people talking about your organization. So that's the impact materiality side, if you think about it, of whenever you need to determine a double materiality as required by the EU CSRD. But effectively, with AI now, you are able to see what are people talking about you and what are people expecting from you. And that's for me where I've been wowed, because my time in terms of the initial diagnostic has been reduced by probably a good 35% or 40%.
Oh.
The other thing you can do with AI is, have you ever thought putting your financial statements into ChatGPT? What does ChatGPT say to you on your financial statements? So it's becoming a bit of your consulting assistant as well. That can be that excellence in terms of that. So those are projects we're building, because the other aspect as well that takes a significant amount of time is SECR reporting. So with the company I'm working, NeoEco, they can generate an ECCR report in less than 5 minutes.
Wow. And how long would it take to generate manually?
I've been talking to a few clients, a few proposals as well, that basically the message is it takes a while. And the message can be quite like, it takes a while. That's a bit frustrating message. So when I open and say, by the way, have you thought of generating this in less than 5 minutes? Then they're very interested. So that's where I think is stepping back and thinking about your integration of sustainability and ESG. What can you automate now with AI?
So just to rewind again, Jose, I also have a kind of high-level understanding of ESG, but what's the report called now that it would take 5 minutes with the new partnership that you have? What's the report called? Sorry, is that typically one of the first steps you would take with a client?
Yeah, so it's the SECR report, which is a requirement done by the government for you to disclose your Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 emissions. So Scope 1 is what you control, and Scope 2 is your purchase electricity, or how do you electrify your operations, and Scope 3 is everything that is outside your control. So companies, that is a requirement as part of strategic report, and it also comes from the changes made to Companies Act as a result of the UK Climate Change Act integrated in 2008. So that report, if you think about it, collating information for Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3, which is a requirement by TCFD and is a requirement by the EU regulation that's been enacted, can take quite a bit of time, because you need to make changes to your accounting system. You also need to understand what you're trying to collate and learn that, and then you depend on others. So if you think of that whole process, can be quite time consuming.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. Definitely. So, Jose, how do you see jobs evolving within the ESG and sustainability sector over the coming years?
It's I think people at the moment, I feel that it's a good question, because I sometimes feel imposter syndrome with this whole landscape of what's happening with, the US side and obviously the simplification of the EU, because it creates the picture a bit that the changes in weather patterns are becoming an investment risk that is affecting employee supply chain, your own portfolio and people's credit risk. So for me, I probably may see some sort of, again, a mindset change in terms of the next 10 years of people maybe seeing this as just as a burden because of the noise politically at the moment. AI also will bring an impact in the workforce. I think companies may become a bit more lean by automating a number of processes across the sustainability and ESG landscape. So for me, I think I want to give a balanced response. I think the younger generations are jumping on the sustainability and ESG kind of job marketplace because it's the fundamental kind of values that they feel, and on how the world is going. They can clearly see it that we are over consuming and overproducing a significant amount of stuff. But then if you start looking at maybe my age and maybe the kind of the 35 and above, you may be seeing some sort of a what's going on? Do I keep myself together? Do I, like, for example, I was telling you before the call is with all this discussion about climate change, is the word climate change added on my website the right approach to do? People may be scared about it and be like, oh, it's another aspect of it. So there may be a change in terminologies. There is also the noise, for example, on ESG coming off and becoming competitive sustainability. There is a Cambridge paper talking about that and moving away from because at the end of the day, why are people not doing climate change, ESG and sustainability? Is because the words have been reflective of cost. And if you start maybe using different language, are you going to be able to show people that, yes, this cost might be bigger without action?
Yeah, we've talked in the past, Jose, about the skill set that chartered accountants have and auditors have is very transferable into ESG. They're very analytical. They can handle large amounts of data, very objective in the way that they look at things. Jose, would you still recommend, if there's anybody listening to this who's considering a change of career into ESG, is it still an area you'd recommend moving into? Do you think there'll be good job opportunities in the sector over the next 5-10 years and it'll be sustainable through the AI push that's coming up?
Yeah, I think for me, to also add to that is, I think for me, it is a matter of, what I would advise any finance professional is integrate ESG in anything you're doing. Not the regulation, not that, integrate GRA, integrate CSRD, integrate all this. No, it's effectively is, how can I integrate ESG in my decision making that I'm making on a day-to-day basis? And that's for me the fundamental aspect is, because if you think about, it's like health and safety in mining. Health and safety is added in every single meeting where you're in mining. If you're talking to anyone in mining, there's health and safety point at the end in the agenda saying, anyone problem with health and safety? ESG is something that, in my view, going to be integrated. ESG tax, ESG forensic, ESG, but it's not going to be called ESG tax. It's probably just going to be tax, but with changes made internally to become more ESG in its fundament. So for me is, if you're a financial professional, maybe do what I've done, which is effectively just keep yourself self-educate. Don't ignore it. Don't just completely, oh, it's a cost, I don't care about it, etc. It's, okay, let me learn today about carbon accounting, for example. What does that mean in the future? Because we all know we have carbon emissions skyrocketing. I think, if you're going to question and debate NASA, UK Met Office, and the EU Copernicus, then then I don't know what else you can question, for me, in my view. So for me, if those three are raising the alert that we are seeing a change in our world, then you as a financial professional should probably be listening to those experts and saying, what can I do to start integrating language for me to then operate better? Because yes, audit and accountancy, you're a historian. You're a storyteller of a company. You're a historian. You know exactly what the company is doing, the activities, the risks, the assumptions, how they're using the key assets effectively. So if you think about those skills, it's the same aspect of this ESG story. You should be able to know, if you've been auditing a company for 10 years, how sustainable they are.
Great.
Right? So as part of your risk assessment, you should be saying they've committed to this, they've committed to that. Or, well, in my audit in Chile, for example, that's probably 14 years ago, my first ever audit, we were looking at environmental provisions and terminologies that were very, very complex in audit, like reserves, mineral reserves, and all of that. me as an auditor to audit those companies, I had to learn those words. So this is the same landscape, is start learning those key concepts that are more of a, will enhance your decision making. Like, for example, double materiality is such a good mechanism of identifying financial materiality. Okay, what do investors care? And then what do the other stakeholders and the group think of my company? And if you're able to determine a double materiality for each sector and company, imagine how practical your decision making will be.
Absolutely.
So I think for me is move away from the mindset that yes, it's a cost. I get that we have regulation being integrated on it, but you shouldn't ignore that it's an investment and potentially an audit risk.
Absolutely. No, great advice, Jose. I like it. Jose, for yourself, you mentioned that you obviously working at university, which is fantastic. And you'd also mentioned that you've got a major tender out at the moment. So what overall are your personal and business plans for Simplified Climate for 2025?
Yeah, so I think for me, managing a startup has been one of the biggest challenges I've ever experienced, probably one of the toughest ones in my life. I think we've been dealing with some funding challenges, like any startup, I think that's today's world. So from starting Simplify Climate to now, we've been able to automate a lot of the processes. So I think for what I want to get out of more or less my own personal kind of landscape is I want to train the future generations, and that's the reason why I wanted to do that lecturer role. And it's for the University of West London. I do a lecture every morning, and my module is sustainability frameworks, risk assessment, and analytics. So we effectively go through ISSB, the International Sustainability Standards Board for standards, the Task Force for Climate Discourse, and all the various frameworks. So that is really helping me to teach the future generations that we have an investment risk that we need to try and monitor and try to solve as a world. So then that is then leading to Simplified Climate becoming a bit of an educator of company, more or less. So we are having a number of, so we work with Mercia, that's one of our clients, which provides training to accountancy firms. And we've been working with them since August last year. So we are helping them improve their ESG assurance manual and also the audit methodology, integration of climate change, because the regulator is going to review climate risk across tier 2 and tier 3 audit firms. So I think that's where the Simplified Climate story is coming to. We are becoming a training provider in the sense of that's where the demand and the appetite is at the moment. We are also helping organizations develop a net zero strategy, integrate sustainability matters. So we work with NeoEco, which is a software solution, and we effectively connect your accounting system to their kind of software, and we can start categorizing which transaction suppliers are more at risk from an ESG perspective that you need to start monitoring. So yeah, I think the Simplified Climate story as a startup is a challenging one. I think having a lecture hat, a lecture role hat, and an entrepreneur hat, and then also a consultant hat can be quite complex. But I think by having these various revenue streams can help us show people that we are simplifying the landscape, right? If you think about it, and that's the fundamental point is, can we simplify your training? What training are you currently giving to your employees? And to kind of, what's the reason of that education piece is because how can you commit to something if you haven't trained your employees? So how can you be net zero if your employees don't behave net zero? So that's the landscape of why this lecture role and this Simplified Climate building kind of learning modules is becoming that training educator. Because as you said from the previous question, the previous question you asked me about the UK, the changes in ESG, etc., there is a reduction in budgets, and I can see it. And there is a big pushback in terms of why we need to do all of this now. So while that kind of mindset gets adapted, we are then at Simplified Climate focusing on training individuals.
Sounds good, Jose. You're covering a lot of bases, and it sounds like you've got a lot of traction. It's still less than 2 years you've been going, so it's still very, very early.
Yeah, it's. I think for me, the biggest advice I tell people is buy the book Surrounded by Idiots, buy the book Surrounded by Bad Bosses, and then you'll realize that probably you are the bad boss and you are the idiot why no one understands you. Because I think that's the other landscape of this is sustainability and ESG is coming so rapidly. I work at 200 miles per hour. Other people work at 50, maybe 100. Other people have other problems. So, and if you think about it, we are getting pushed all this regulation when we as people are dealing with a water crisis in the UK that we can't drink our own water. We're dealing with mental health crisis. We're dealing with a cost of inflation that our energy bills may increase because of, the net zero agenda, and then also because of the war still going, with Russia and Ukraine, that may also create some sort of effect in energy prices. So if you think about these foundational individuals who are getting pushed by this and saying you need to reduce emissions, I would be like, I got bigger things to worry about. So that's the thing that why is fundamental to, if you can do 1% a day and think about yourself and where can you maybe buy the one less coffee cup and get yourself a disposable one, buy yourself one less plastic bottle, those 1% will make a huge difference in my view. And that's what I've done to also my health and well-being. Because the other aspect as well, if you cook your own food, you buy less plastic. So yeah, on that note.
Yeah. Right, Jose, and if anyone's looking to reach out to you regarding consultancy, training or public speaking, what's the best way for someone to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so we're updating our website to reflect our latest changes in line with the challenges we are experiencing as a startup, but also to reflect our partnership with NeoEco. So a good place to contact is just visit our website, which is www.simplifyclimate.co. The other aspect is LinkedIn. Feel free to message me. I have a number of meetings with people that are lost in the ESG landscape. They put 10 minutes with me. We have a quick chat. I give them a few frameworks, a few discussion points. This is all informal advice too, and basically they go ahead with it. And then the third mechanism is my email, which is Jose@simplifyclimate, and Jose with a J, not with an H, please, at simplifyclimate.co. And I'll be happy to show and demonstrate our capabilities, because you might hear, yes, AI technology, but you need to come and see what we have. And it can be a free introductory call where I basically show you our capabilities, how we're helping it, and show you your deliverable. What can you present to the board? And I think those are the three aspects. And if you're interested in any training, any public speaking, just feel free to reach out. We can produce a course outline for your organization that's specific to your industry. Also, some noise on your competitors, what they're doing, to then allow that enhanced decision making that's required.
Thanks again, Jose. Really appreciate your time, and we'll hopefully catch up soon.
Yeah, of course, Andrew, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about Simplified Climate and talk about my various hats that I'm trying to manage. We might be talking in 5 years and I'm just a lecturer, or we may be talking in 5 years and I'm talking about health and well-being with all my craziness on fitness and food. But no, I'm enjoying the landscape. It's been challenging, I think, a startup, but but the fundamental of being a subject matter expert on sustainability and accounting keeps me pushing, because if you can train the future generations and train people to make change for good, then it's great thing for me.
Sounds good, Jose, and I look forward to catching up soon.
Take care, Andrew, my friend. Take care. Bye bye.